What's going on, everybody? Eric from Panola here, where we're continuing our trek through CompTIA Security Plus SY0-601 here at panola.edu, where we teach cybersecurity, networking, and digital forensics, but more on that in a minute. In Objective 1.7, we're covering the summarizing of techniques used in security assessments. Now, this is really critical here because not only are we required as security technicians and security managers to go in and make sure that as much as possible is secure on our network for not only the user, but for the data involved in our systems, but we also need to be able to go through and test those security protocols that we put into place, whether they're technical, operational, or managerial controls. Now, this is primarily covered in Chapter 5 and 12 of our CompTIA Security Plus SY0-601 book that we're using here at Panola for our courses. And today we're going to be covering vulnerability assessments used in order to be able to keep those security controls in place. Because some organizations do require certain security procedures to be put in place based on the type of business that they are. For instance, here in the United States, financial institutions are required to keep up to date with current federal regulations for security controls, because we don't want data pertaining to our money to be able to get out in the open and for everybody to see and pull money from our accounts. That's why we require a higher level of security and certain specific protocols in place for those financial institutions. And the same goes for stuff like medical operations. We don't want our health information or PII, anything that could be a violation of HIPAA, to go out into the public. And for education agencies, we don't want FERPA to be a violation issue either. So that's why these security controls are put into place, but we use vulnerability assessment to test them. Now, as I've already hinted, not all security controls are technical based. Some of them are physically based, and we've seen in the other objectives, and we covered already together, that there are physical controls we can put into place to prevent some stuff from happening, like shoulder surfing and tailgating and stuff like that. So physical is just as important as a technical control, and that's why it's broken down in those three levels of control types. We have the technical, we have the operational, and the managerial controls that we've already been over, but that's why they're there. Now, as an organization, the way we enforce all this is by bringing in pen testers. And the reason that we don't necessarily do this ourselves all the time or do it alone is because how much can we really trust ourselves to be able to properly report and send information up? I'm not saying that you ain't trustworthy. I believe you. But if we bring in an outside organization sometimes to be able to pen test our equipment or our systems, they're going to give us a true breakdown of what's actually vulnerable on our network or systems. Because we go with the pen testing teams to be able to go in as a unbiased testing group to give us that feedback. Now, there are definitely rules of engagements that we have to put into place, and this kind of breaks up how the pen testing operates. So either they're a white hat, which we've covered already, where they're given a lot of information about our network, such as username and passwords, IP addresses, and particular systems that they need to be focusing on. So they know a lot, and they'll be able to go in and test a lot. And then we have black hat hackers or pen testers, where they are given zero to nothing in information, because we want them to be able to go in as if they were somebody on the complete outside to see if they can break into everything. And based on the reports, if they find anything, they'll let us know. And if they could do it, it's a potential that somebody else could as well too. And somewhere in the middle is gray hat. And the reason we have gray hat is because, again, rules of engagement for our organization. Sometimes we have systems online within our network that we don't really want pen tested because they're that sensitive. We'll do a vulnerability assessment using, let's say, Nessus, but we don't want pen testers having fun with it because it may wreck it and kind of take away a critical component of our organization for the users involved. But it all comes down to how those rules of engagements are laid out and how the system and network owner, the CIO, CEO, CISO, somebody in that C-suite, how they lay the rules out and have that agreement with the actual pen testing group that's coming in to do that assessment. Now, I said a while ago that we work in conjunction with pen testers sometimes, because it's not always about bringing in a third party every single time. We could do a lot of this stuff ourselves, not necessarily on the pen testing level, but on reconnaissance. And we can perform network reconnaissance with discovery tools. Now, why would we want to do this? Well, as we've discussed before with BYOD and other type of environments, there may be stuff on the network that we weren't necessarily anticipating or accounted for. And discovery tools such as Nmap allow us to be able to go and scan the network and see if anything in the inventory logically has changed. So is there a new system on the network that we weren't aware of, or was it reported, or whatever the case may be? Because it may be that it belongs to an employee or a system user, or it may be that it belongs to somebody that's not supposed to be there. And that's why running regular discovery scans using tools that allow for this can go through and help us hash out what's supposed to be there and what's not. And that same reconnaissance allows us to be able to test out the actual network flow of what's actually supposed to happen. So we want to make sure that users within our organization are going to the proper website. We want to make sure that they're taking the proper path to get there, and that something in the routing hasn't wonkied up to where a man-in-the-middle attack is occurring. If our routes are established to where it goes from point A to point B through this intermediary, if there's another hop in there, then that might be suspicious enough for us to investigate even further. Now, you may be asking yourself, how do we test out stuff like this? That's where tools like Tracert on the Windows side and Traceroute on the POSIX-based system side, Linux systems, comes into play at. We just simply use that command in conjunction with a fully qualified domain name like google.com to see what those routes look like to compare to notes that we have already. And we can go one step further to make sure that that domain is actually what it's supposed to be. We use tools like NSLOOKUP all the time to make sure that google.com is actually associated with the IP address that is registered in the ICANN database. And if you don't know, definitely Google the ICANN, because ICANN is a repository of who owns what in IP spacing, kind of like a big who is. I hope you got that hint right there. But that's pretty much the nickel and dime of how we do security assessments and why, and just scratching the surface on some of the stuff that we used in order to be able to accomplish that. Now, definitely go back and read chapters 5 and 12 and check out some of the other stuff that we have at panola.edu for degree programs. Now, we cover cybersecurity, networking, and digital forensics, but there is something out there for everybody, and I highly encourage you to go check it. And that's all for this one. I hope to see you in the next one.